We have arrived at the end of April, and soon it will be May. That means that it is the season of pollen allergies. But more delightfully, here in New England, it is the season of new lambs. I look back in my photographs from the past years. If I go to this date, or around about this date, I find photographs year after year of my friend Marty and her newest crop of lambs. She tells me they're due very soon out on her farm. So it is fitting then that today we read of sheep. Today is in fact known in some church circles as Good Shepherd Sunday. It has a name, Good Shepherd Sunday. Because today, by church tradition, we read from the Gospel of John, chapter 10, of which Barbara just read a portion today. The lectionary that is held in common by many Christian churches conveniently places this midway between Easter and Pentecost, just in time for the arrival of the new lambs here in New England. In fact, right here in Deerfield, next weekend is Heritage Sheep Days, where you can go and see some sheep in person and pat some lambs. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say pet or pat, but anyway, you can touch some lambs. And one of the most popular attractions of Heritage Sheep Days is the sheepdog herding exhibition. Now, right, you've seen those. I said nodding, right? I go see those, and then I come home to my dog, and I'm like, slacker. But it's amazing, right, to watch dogs just with a few words from their owners maneuver a herd of sheep. This is our image in New England of sheep herding. And in the land of my heritage, which is the British Isles, that is how it is typically done. You train a dog to chase the sheep. But in traditional Middle Eastern shepherding, as it was practiced centuries ago and in some places is still practiced today, they do not train dogs. They train the sheep. They train the sheep to be accustomed to the voice of the shepherd. The shepherd will make characteristic sort of sounds and trills that are specific to him or presumably her. And the sheep actually know this sound. I have seen videos of this. This is a thing. So the sheep are trained to the shepherd's voice, and as the shepherd moves along, making those little sounds that the sheep have come to trust, they will follow along behind. The sheep are not running from dogs. They are running towards their shepherd. So they're not motivated by fear, but by trust. They know the shepherd's going to take them somewhere good. Today is Good Shepherd Sunday. The metaphor of the leader of the people as the shepherd of the sheep way predates Jesus. In the Torah, God promises a shepherd so that the people will not, and he will send a shepherd so that the people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. And then today we have the prophet Jeremiah lambasting those who have been placed in a position to shepherd Israel and yet have not cared for their people. Ezekiel, too, has a passage in which he names all the things that the shepherds of the people have failed to do. You have not cared for the injured. You have not sought out the lost. You have not fed them. And he says, I will take you from my people and give them new shepherds. They were warning the people of the shepherds who exploited the sheep but did not love them. The leaders of the people who would care only for their own power and profit and not for for the safety and well-being of their people. I saw a video just recently of a Lebanese shepherd. This is current. It was filmed a month ago. Who was leading his flock away from the border where they lived to take them out of the range of bombs. He was walking in front. The sheep were following. They had been walking like this for 3 days and had 2 more days ahead of them. Welcome to Good Shepherd Sunday in the year 2026. This passage from John, if you follow the common lectionary, you will hear a portion of this discourse, the Good Shepherd discourse from John, every year at this time. And it is from this discourse that we have the sort of stained glass images that you can picture of Jesus as a shepherd. Sometimes carrying the lamb on his shoulders, a reference to the first little parable that I read today about the shepherd who seeks the lost lamb and carries it safely home. And in today's passage, we hear of the Good Shepherd. I am the Good Shepherd. I would lay down my life for the sheep. The shepherd who calls his sheep by name, the sheep follow him because they know his voice, they trust him. But then right in the middle, there's this weird paragraph. Because Jesus is talking about the shepherd and the sheep, and the disciples are trying to grasp the metaphor. This is surprisingly obtuse of them because presumably they've read Jeremiah, they've read Ezekiel, they know about the shepherds and the good shepherds and the bad shepherds. And Jesus says, I'll explain it to you. I am the gate. Welcome to Good Shepherd Sunday, or as I like to think of it, Mixed Metaphor Sunday. I am the gate for the sheep. Those who came before me are thieves and bandits. The sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. Jesus is depicted in stained glass windows as a good shepherd or sometimes as a lamb, but I don't know if I've ever seen a painting or a stained glass window of Jesus the gate. I have a hard time imagining what that would look like. John's gospel is a strange gospel. It is quite different from the other 3. The earliest gospel is probably Mark's. It is certainly the shortest. The Jesus of Mark's gospel is always telling people not to tell people who he is. Someone will say, you're the Son of God, and he goes, shh, don't say that. Don't tell people that. The Jesus of God's gospel, on the other hand, tells people this every chance he gets. I am the bread of life, I am the light, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, I am the good shepherd, I am the gate. More than one scholar has come to the conclusion that these may not, in fact, be the words of Jesus, but the affirmations of the early church. Not a memory, but a profession of faith. John's gospel was written in a time when the early, what we would now think of as Christian community, and the non-Christian Jewish community were separated. Up until then, Jesus' followers were thought of themselves as Jews who believed that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. But most of their Jewish leaders were having none of that. And so the followers of Jesus were realizing that they were not maybe part of that fold anymore, which was an insecure and anxious time for them. And so this gospel was written in a time of differentiation, of trying to figure out who they were. They needed to affirm that they had not been cut off from God's flock, but that they were themselves God's people and the sheep of God's pasture. And so there's a lot of us and them language in John's gospel. So maybe that is one way that we can understand this language because, I don't know about you, but I'm I'm good with the Good Shepherd. I'm a little uncomfortable with the gate. No one gets in except through me. Right? He's sounding a little less like a shepherd and more like a bouncer. Or maybe like the assistant of a very high-powered, powerful person. The person who controls access, the power broker. I am the gate. But I want to point out two things. First, he is the gate for the sheep. He's not keeping the sheep out. There's nothing here about like, I'm only going to get my own sheep in here. The rest of you sheep, go find yourselves another pen. So whatever he's doing by saying he's the gate, he's not saying the sheep can't come in. In fact, he goes on to say, I have other sheep from other folds. They're mine also. So I was watching this video about, as one does, about Middle Eastern traditional shepherding practices. And I saw this sheepfold. It was a sheepfold of, they're made of stone, they're not like, electrified fences like my friend has. There are these very old sheepfolds in the hills. So wherever you are, you go, you find the sheepfold at night. You lead your sheep in. And the stones go all the way around, and there's a little opening. There's walls and a little opening. And you lead your sheep in, and the sheep all come in, and you get them all inside for the night, so they won't wander off, because a sheep alone will be picked up by a wolf. They need to stay close. You come back around, and here is this opening, and the shepherd lies in the opening for the night. I am the gate. I am the gate. I place my body between the sheep and the wolves who would devour them, because I am the good shepherd, and I will stand in the breach. It sounds a little different when you picture that. So maybe it's not a mixed metaphor after all. Maybe it's not Jesus is the good shepherd, but also the gatekeeper. Maybe it's all one thing. I'm the good shepherd, therefore, at night, I will be the gate. I will stand in the breach to keep you safe. And if one of you is left on the mountain, I will go and find you before nightfall and get you back to safety. Or here's another possibility. Now that I'm picturing this sheep pen, where the gatekeeper is a human being that stands in the breach, not someone who locks the door. And when Jesus says, I am the gate, is he perhaps not saying, I block the door, but I am the door? Not I stand in the breach, but I am the breach. I am the way in. I am the way out. I am the way out of no way. Because when we join a church, when we join a flock, as some of you are contemplating doing, there can sometimes be this uncomfortable feeling that now you've joined the club, and you're an insider, and you belong to the fold, and you are somehow separated from the rest of humanity. That church door shuts behind you, and now there's us and them. But if our sense of the holy is not an enclosed space, but a breach in the wall, then we have to keep our foot in the door. We have to keep it from shutting tight behind us, so the sheep can go out and find the green pasture and can come in and find the shelter day by day. One last sheep reference from the Gospels. One of the resurrection stories from the Gospel of, I don't know which one, I can't remember. Might be John. I think it is also John. Jesus appears to Peter and to the disciples, but at some point he says, Peter, let's talk. So he takes Peter off to the side. Now remember, this is Peter who had denied even knowing him when the guards came for Jesus, right? And in whatever has happened here, whatever the resurrection might be, whatever moment Peter is in, Jesus says to Peter, so, do you love me? And Peter says, yes. And Jesus says, then feed my sheep. And he asks him again. He says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, you know I do. And he says, feed the lambs. And he asks him a third time, and Peter gets a little frustrated because he's already answered the question twice, and then maybe Peter remembers that he has to take back 3 denials because he said he didn't know him 3 times. So Jesus gives him that third chance he needs, and he says, so do you love me? And he says, you know that I do. And he says, okay. Will you please take care of my sheep? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He makes me walk in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.